The warning came too late. You'll regret this night. Lucian didn't raise his voice when he said it. He didn't need to. Men listened when he spoke quietly. Fear had taught them to. The kind of fear that came from knowing a single word from him could erase careers, families, entire bloodlines. But the woman standing in front of him didn't flinch. She paused at the doorway of his penthouse, the city lights spilling in behind her like a living thing, illuminating the sharp contrast between the world she was stepping away from and the one she was leaving behind. Her red dress caught the light, bold and defiant against the cold marble and glass. Slowly she turned. Her eyes met his, not challenging, not afraid, just certain. "No," she said softly. "You will." Then she walked out. The door closed with a sound so quiet it felt violent. Lucian stood frozen, the silence swallowing him whole. Somewhere behind him, a glass tipped over and shattered against the floor, but he didn't remember throwing it. His reflection stared back at him from the blackened window, tailored suit, sharp features, a man who ruled from shadows. And yet his hands were shaking, not from anger, from humiliation, from something far worse. Loneliness. 7 women, 7 in 3 months, different faces, different excuses, same ending, too much, too dangerous, too frightening, to him. Lucian poured himself a drink he didn't want and didn't taste. The city below buzzed with life, unaware that the man who controlled half its darkness was unraveling in a silent penthouse above it. His phone vibrated on the counter. Victor. Lucian ignored it. For once the docs could wait, the money could wait, the violence could wait. Because for the first time in years, Lucian wasn't thinking about power. He was thinking about the look in her eyes when she walked away. Not fear. Pity. And that hurt more than any gunshot ever had. 3 nights earlier, everything had felt different. 3 nights earlier, he still believed this story could end another way. The Crimson Lotus Casino never slept. It breathed. Neon lights pulsed like a heartbeat, money changing hands with the efficiency of blood through veins. Lucian had built it from nothing, brick by brick, body by body, and now it was untouchable. So was he. At least, that's what everyone believed. Lucian sat alone in his office overlooking the main floor, watching the crowd without seeing it. His empire moved below him like clockwork. Dealers smiled. Security watched. No one caused trouble. No one dared. Victor leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, studying him with the familiarity only survival could earn. "You're rotting," Victor said. Lucian didn't look up. "I'm working." "You've been working for 3 weeks straight." Victor tilted his head. "When was the last time you slept somewhere other than that couch?" Lucian closed the letter slowly. "What do you want?" Victor smirked. "You need to get out. There's a new girl at Oik's." Lucian's jaw tightened. "No, come on, high-end place, not your usual. I'm not interested." Victor's grin faded. "You can't keep doing this to yourself." Lucian stood, straightened his cuffs. "Drop it." Victor hesitated, then softened. "Boss, you can't give up." Lucian's eyes darkened. "I already have." An hour later, he found himself stepping into Oik's anyway. The music thumped low and heavy, vibrating through his bones. The air smelled like perfume and expectation. Men with money and men with power filled the room, all pretending they were in control. Lucian hated places like this. Then the lights dimmed. A spotlight cut through the darkness, landing on the stage, and she walked out. She didn't rush, didn't smile too much, didn't perform desperation. She moved like someone who knew exactly who she was and didn't need permission to exist. Lucian felt it then, that shift in the chest, the recognition. "She doesn't take everyone," Victor murmured beside him. "Turns guys down all the time." Lucian didn't answer, he watched. When her set ended, she didn't disappear backstage. She went to the bar and ordered water. That detail stuck with him more than it should have. He didn't remember deciding to stand. One moment he was watching. Next he was beside her. "I'm not buying," she said without turning, "and I don't do lap dances for strangers. I'm not asking for either." She turned slowly, eyes scanning him with calm intelligence. "What do you want?" 5 minutes. She studied him like a problem she hadn't decided whether to solve. Finally, she nodded toward a booth in the corner. 5. They talked, not about nothing, not about money or power or empty promises. She asked him questions people were usually afraid to ask. And somehow, without meaning to, Lucian answered honestly. About loneliness, about control, about what it cost to be untouchable. When the 5 minutes were up, she stood. "Dinner," he said quickly, holding out his card. "No expectations." She stared at it like it might burn her, then she took it. "1 dinner." Lucian watched her walk away, something dangerous blooming in his chest. Hope. And hope, he knew better than anyone, was the most dangerous thing of all. Restaurant sat high above the city, all glass and soft lighting, the kind of place where conversations were meant to feel private even when they were. Lucian arrived early again, irritation and anticipation tangled in his chest. He told himself it was about control, about respecting her time, but the truth was simpler. He didn't want to miss her. She arrived 10 minutes late, not rushed, not apologetic. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, hair pulled back like she had nothing to prove. You actually showed up, she said as she sat. I said I would. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Most men don't. Dinner moved slowly, deliberately. She ordered water again. He ordered wine and barely touched it. They spoke about things that mattered and skipped the things that didn't. She told him she was in nursing school, one semester away. He told her he built his world young and paid for it ever since. She didn't ask him what he did, not directly, and he didn't volunteer it. The space between them felt charged but restrained, like both of them understood that rushing would ruin something fragile. When they stood to leave, he offered to take her home. Not tonight, she said gently. Lucian nodded. Not tonight. She surprised him by stepping closer, her voice dropping. Eventually, though, we'll have to talk about the thing you're avoiding. His chest tightened. What thing? She smiled faintly. You don't look like a man afraid of the world. You look like a man afraid of one very specific moment. Before he could respond, she stepped back and hailed a cab. That night, Lucian didn't sleep. Over the next days, messages turned into calls. Calls turned into quiet meals, walks that stayed public, moments that felt real instead of transactional. She noticed the way he always scanned rooms. He noticed the way she never sat with her back to a door. Neither commented. It was easy, too easy, which was why Lucian knew it would end badly. First warning came from Victor. She's not clean, Victor said, sliding a thin file across Lucian's desk. Lucian didn't open it. Define clean. Her past isn't what she told you. Lucian finally looked down. Photos, reports. A man dead in Atlanta 3 years ago. Charges dropped. A disappearance. Lucian's jaw tight. You're sure? Victor nodded. I wouldn't bring it to you if I was. That night Lucian called her. We need to talk, he said. They met at one of his warehouses, neutral ground. She walked in wary but composed. When he showed her the file, she didn't deny it. I killed him, she said quietly, because if I didn't he would have killed me. The truth spilled out in fragments, violence, fear, a choice made in seconds and paid for ever since. She didn't ask for forgiveness, she asked to be understood. Lucian dismissed his men, leaving them alone in the vast space. No more lies, he said. She nodded. Then you go, he told her, the thing he hated most about himself. The reason women ran. The reason nights ended like the one she'd walked away from. He expected shock, revulsion. Instead, she listened. We adapt, she said simply. People who care adapt. For the first time in years, Lucian believed her. That belief shattered days later. Surveillance photos arrived. Someone had been watching them. Russians, old enemies, people who knew exactly how to hurt him. A message came, we have her, come alone. Victor said it was a trap. Lucian went anyway. The pier was cold and empty. She was tied to a chair, blood at her lip, eyes blazing. They didn't beg, they planned. Lucian made a call he swore he never would. The FBI answered. Deals were discussed. Lines crossed. Worlds burned. As the boat cut through dark water toward what might be freedom, Lucian felt the weight of everything he was about to lose. Then the shot rang out. Pain exploded. Chaos followed. And in that moment, Lucian understood something too late. Saving her was easy. Keeping her would cost him everything. The bullet didn't kill him. That realization came first, cutting through the shock with brutal clarity. Pain flared across his side, white-hot and consuming, but it wasn't the kind that stole consciousness. It was the kind that demanded attention. Survival pain. Lucian, her voice broke through the chaos, sharp and furious, not panicked. Never panicked. He forced his eyes open. The boat was pitching hard, engine screaming as the pilot swerved. Victor was shouting orders into a phone, blood running down his temple. Sirens wailed somewhere far too close for comfort. She was already on him. Her hands pressed against his side, firm, practiced, exactly where they needed to be. Nursing student. He remembered that absurdly even as the world blurred. You're hit, she said, not asking. I know. Don't talk. Not dying, he muttered. She shot him a look that said she'd decide that. Another gunshot cracked the night, closer this time. The pilot cursed. They're still on us, Victor yelled. 2 minutes, maybe less. Lucian grabbed her wrist. Listen to me. She leaned in, eyes locked on his, daring him to finish whatever thought he was trying to form. If this goes wrong, it won't, she snapped. If it does, he continued anyway, you don't look back. Her jaw tightened. You don't get to tell me how to survive. The boat slammed into the dock, metal shrieking against concrete. Hands grabbed them, dragging them into shadows as floodlights flared. Federal jackets, raised weapons, controlled chaos. They moved fast, too fast. Lucian caught her hand just before they pulled them apart. I'm here, she said, fierce and steady. I'm not going anywhere. But protocol didn't care about promises. They separated them with professional efficiency. He was loaded into an ambulance, she into an unmarked vehicle. As the doors closed, Lucian felt something colder than fear settle in his chest. Instinct. The same instinct that had kept him alive long before he learned to be powerful. This wasn't over. The hospital room was quiet in the way only expensive places were. Machines hummed softly. The city loomed beyond thick glass. Lucian woke to Victor standing at the foot of the bed, too still. They didn't take her where they said, Victor said. Lucian's heart kicked hard. What do you mean? The route changed. Orders came from higher up. Lucian pushed himself upright despite the pain. From who? Victor hesitated. That's the problem, no one's claiming it. Lucian stared at the ceiling, mind racing. Russians, feds, someone inside his own operation, or someone who'd been watching longer than he realized. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. You should have walked away when you had the chance. Lucian exhaled slowly. Anger burned hotter than the wound in his side. Whoever took her thought desperation would make him sloppy. They were wrong, they had just reminded him who he was. By nightfall, his hospital room was a command center. Screens glowed, phones rang, names surfaced, patterns emerged. She's not a prisoner, Marcus said quietly. She's an asset. Lucian's jaw tightened. They weren't protecting her, they were using her, her past, her proximity to him. A photo arrived. She sat in a stark room, hands cuffed to a table, a bruise blooming on her cheek, but her eyes were sharp, unbroken, alive. A second message followed. Everyone breaks. Lucian typed a single word. Try. He stood, pain be damned, and pulled on his jacket. Find her, he said, quietly. By morning, he knew where she was. Not officially. Officially, she didn't exist. They moved at dusk. No alarms, no gunfire, just precision. Power cut during a scheduled maintenance window. Doors that opened because someone had been paid months ago. Guards who never realized their shift was supposed to end. Lucian walked the final corridor alone. He paused at the door. Fear hit him then, real fear. The kind he hadn't felt since he was a boy with nothing but instincts and blood on his hands. He opened it. She looked up. You're an idiot, she said hoarsely. Relief hit him so hard he almost staggered. He crossed the room and pulled her into him, careful of the cuffs, careful of the bruises, careful of everything except the truth burning in his chest. I'm sorry, he murmured. Going to come for you now, she said. They already were. He snapped the cuffs. The lights came back on, the door slammed shut. A voice filled the room, calm and amused. Thank you for leading us straight to her. Lucian turned slowly, placing himself in front of her. You should have taken the deal, Agent Chin said over the intercom. Lucian smiled, dark and steady. No, he said, you should have walked away. The floor vibrated, not an explosion, something deeper, structural. Darkness swallowed the room. In the chaos, Lucian moved, guiding her through memory and instinct, gunfire echoing somewhere distant. An exit opened where it shouldn't have. Victor waited outside, blood on his sleeve. They didn't stop until the helicopter lifted them above the trees. Only then did Lucian breathe. This doesn't end, she said quietly. No, he agreed. It just changed. The helicopter banked sharply. The pilot swore. Radar alarm screamed. Lucian tightened his grip on her as headlights flared in the darkness ahead. And in that instant he understood the truth he'd been avoiding from the start. Saving her was easy. Keeping her alive would cost him everything. The helicopter dropped suddenly, a violent lurch that slammed Lucian's shoulder into the metal frame. She cried out, fingers digging into his jacket as the pilot fought the controls. We've got company, the pilot shouted. Unmarked. Fast. Through the windshield, a pair of lights cut through the darkness behind them, closing in with predatory speed. Not law enforcement, not Russians, something quieter, something designed to disappear. Lucian's mind moved faster than the aircraft. How many minutes? 2, maybe 3 before they're in range. Victor leaned forward, already unbuckling. We can't outrun them. Lucian looked at her. Even bruised, even exhausted, she was watching the lights with sharp calculation, not fear, strategy. Track the extraction, she said, which means someone wanted us to escape. Lucian's jaw tightened. Chin, she wanted you exposed, she continued. Panicked, public, and then erased. The helicopter shuddered again as a warning shot tore through the air. The pilot swore louder this time. Lucian reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone Victor hadn't known he kept. He dialed without hesitation. You're late, a voice answered. I need the favor now, Lucian said. Coordinates incoming. There was a pause. And that will cost you. Lucian glanced at her, then back at the dark sky ahead. I know. He sent the coordinates and ended the call. The lights behind them flared brighter, too close. Then the night split open. A second helicopter rose from below the tree line, black and silent, cutting across their path with impossible precision. The pursuing lights veered hard, narrowly avoiding collision, and vanished into the darkness. The pilot exhaled a shaky laugh. We're clear. Lucian didn't relax. Not yet. They landed at a private rooftop far from the city's usual routes. The rotors slowed, the night settling around them like a held breath. As soon as her feet hit solid ground, she turned to him. This doesn't end with running. No, Lucian said. It ends with choosing. She searched his face. What are you willing to give up? Lucian thought of his empire, his name, the protection his shadow provided, and the way she'd looked at him when she thought she'd lost everything and still stood tall. Everything, he said. Before she could respond, Victor's phone rang. He listened, then looked up grim. They've moved, Victor said. Chin-S gone underground, and the Russians just closed ranks. Lucian nodded slowly. Then they're scared. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Lucian, if this turns into a war, it already is. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. The city was waking up, unaware of the lines being redrawn beneath it. Lucian took her hand. For the first time, he didn't pull her into his world or shield her from it. He let her stand beside him, equal exposed. "We don't run anymore," he said. "We decide who burns." Her fingers tightened around his. Together. Lucian looked out over the city he'd once ruled from the shadows and felt something unfamiliar settle into his chest. Not fear, not regret. Resolve. Somewhere out there, powerful people were making plans, convinced they still controlled the board. They were wrong. Because the game had changed the moment she didn't walk away, and the next move would destroy someone who never saw it coming. The city looked different from above when you knew it was no longer yours. Lucian stood at the edge of the rooftop, the wind tugging at his jacket, the skyline stretching endlessly before him. Once those buildings had represented control, territory, silence bought with money and fear. Now they felt fragile, temporary, like something already cracking beneath invisible pressure. Behind him, she leaned against the railing, arms crossed, her posture relaxed in a way that told him she was already thinking 10 steps ahead. Pain hadn't slowed her. If anything, it had sharpened her. "They'll move first," she said quietly. "People like them always do." Lucian nodded. "They already have." Victor approached, phone pressed to his ear, voice low. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "Chin's assets are liquidating, offshore, fast. She's cleaning her footprint." "She's not running," Lucian said. "She's repositioning." "Which means?" Victor asked. Lucian turned. "She thinks I won't cross a certain line." She tilted her head. "And will you?" Lucian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her face, the quiet strength in her eyes, the way she stood without asking to be protected. He realized then that this was the moment everything truly split, the point of no return. "Yes," he said finally, "but not the way she expects." They disappeared before sunrise. No announcements, no explosion, just absence. Lucian's people went dark one by one, pulling back from streets they'd controlled for years. To outsiders, it looked like retreat, weakness, collapse. Chin took the bait. By noon, she moved. Raids hit empty warehouses. Accounts she thought mattered turned out to be shells. Informants went silent. Every path she followed led to nothing. By the time she realized what was happening, Lucian was already inside her perimeter. They met in a place neither of them could control, an old courthouse scheduled for demolition, stripped of cameras, stripped of power. Neutral ground, or so she believed. Chin stood near the center of the room, coat immaculate, expression unreadable. "You're burning your own house down," she said when Lucian emerged from the shadows. Lucian smiled faintly. "No, I'm showing you where the foundation actually is." She glanced past him. "And her?" Lucian didn't look back. "You don't get to use her name." Chin's jaw tightened. "You think this ends with me?" Lucian stepped closer, his voice calm, precise. "I think this ends with you choosing which side of history you're on." She laughed softly. "You're offering me mercy?" "No," Lucian said. "I'm offering you survival." Silence stretched. The kind that revealed who people really were. Chin's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and froze. Lucian watched the realization spread across her face as reports flooded in. Warrants. Oversight. Internal investigations triggered by information he'd released hours earlier. Carefully curated, impossible to trace back to him. "You played me," she said quietly. Lucian nodded. "You underestimated her." Chin looked up sharply. "Where is she?" Lucian finally turned. She stood in the doorway, unbound, unbroken, watching with steady eyes. Chin swallowed. "You could have disappeared, both of you." Lucian took her hand. "We're done running." Outside, sirens grew louder, not coming for him, but for Chin. As agents flooded the building, Lucian leaned close to her. "This isn't over." She squeezed his hand. "I know." They walked out together into the rising chaos, unseen, untouched. But somewhere deep in the city, another set of eyes watched the footage replay on a loop. A man who had lost more than Chin ever had. A man who smiled as he made a call. "Prepare everything," he said calmly. "If Lucian wants a war, we'll give him one." Lucian felt it before he heard it, that familiar tightening in his chest. The sense of being watched, hunted. He turned to her, the noise of the city swelling around them. "This is where it gets worse," he said. She met his gaze without hesitation. "Good." Because neither of them noticed the black sedan pulling away from the curb behind them, or the scope adjusting in the distance, or the finger tightening on the trigger. The first shot missed. Lucian felt the air shift beside his ear, a violent whisper that told him exactly how close death had come. He reacted without thinking, yanking her backward just as the concrete behind them exploded into dust. Screams rippled through the street. Chaos bloomed instantly. "Down!" Victor shouted from somewhere behind them. Lucian pulled her into the shadow of a delivery truck as another shot rang out, sharper, closer. Her heart hammered against his chest, but her breathing stayed steady. "They're not trying to kill us fast," she said. "They're hurting," Lucian nodded. "Which means they want us alive." That thought should have been comforting. It was. They moved through the panic with practiced efficiency, slipping through alleyways and service corridors that Lucian had memorized years ago when survival depended on knowing where not to be seen. Sirens wailed, but they weren't coming for the shooter. Not yet. They reached a safe house just as dawn cracked the horizon. Steel doors slammed shut behind them, and for the first time in hours, silence returned. She leaned against the wall, finally letting the exhaustion show. Lucian stepped close, his hand hovering at her back, unsure whether to steady her or himself. "They won't stop now," she said quietly. "You know that." "I do." She looked up at him. "And you're still here." Lucian exhaled slowly. "I warned you." A faint smile touched her lips. "You warned me I'd regret the night. You never said anything about the rest." Before he could answer, Marcus entered, his expression dark. "We intercepted something. Russian channels. They're mobilizing." Lucian closed his eyes briefly. The name he hadn't wanted to hear formed in his mind. Melanov, the man who never forgot a slight, the man who turned patience into a weapon. Victor stepped in behind Marcus. "He knows about her, about what she means to you." Lucian's jaw tightened. "Then he'll come for her." "No," she said calmly. "He'll come through me." Lucian turned to her sharply. "Absolutely not." She met his gaze, unflinching. "I won't be a liability hiding behind walls. If he wants leverage, I'll take it away." Silence fell heavy between them. "This isn't just about you anymore," Lucian said. "It's about everyone." She stepped closer. "Then let me be part of the decision." Lucian searched her face, seeing not recklessness but resolve, the same resolve that had kept her alive long before she met him. Slowly he nodded. "One step at a time." Marcus cleared his throat. "There's more." Lucian looked at him. "Say it." "The Russians aren't acting alone. They've partnered with someone stateside, someone with resources." Lucian felt the familiar chill crawl up his spine. "Who?" Marcus hesitated. "We don't know yet, but they're close, very close." Lucian turned toward the monitors lining the wall. One of them flickered to life without warning. A familiar voice filled the room, smooth and amused. "Lucian, I was beginning to worry you'd gone quiet." Lucian's blood ran cold. "Melanov," he said evenly. Man's face appeared on screen, smiling as if this were a friendly call between old rivals. "You've caused quite a mess, and you found something precious." Lucian stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of her. Melanov chuckled. "Ah, there she is." She didn't flinch. She stepped forward instead. "If you're going to threaten us," she said calmly, "at least be honest about it." Melanov's smile widened. "I admire you already." He leaned closer to the camera. "Here is my offer. You come to me alone, and I let him keep his city." Lucian shook his head. "No." Melanov's eyes hardened. "Then I start removing pieces you can't replace." The screen went black. Silence stretched heavy and ominous. Lucian turned to her slowly. "He's serious." She nodded. "So are we." Outside, somewhere deep in the city, engines roared to life, men moved, weapons were loaded, plans were set in motion that could not be undone. Lucian took her hands, his voice low. "Whatever happens next changes everything." She squeezed back, then let it. Because this time neither of them was walking away, and the war was just beginning. Lucian didn't sleep. He sat in the safe house long after everyone else had drifted into uneasy rest, watching the city through reinforced glass. The streets looked normal from this height. Cars moved. Lights flickered on and off in apartments where people argued, laughed, lived. It was always like this before something ugly happened. Life pretending nothing was about to break. She joined him quietly, a blanket draped over her shoulders. She didn't speak at first, just stood beside him close enough that he could feel her warmth. "He won't wait," she said eventually. "No," Lucian agreed. "Melanov never does." She studied his face in the reflection of the glass. "If I go to him." "No." The word came out sharper than he intended. She didn't back down. "Listen to me, he wants leverage. If he thinks he has it, he slows down. He shows his hand." Lucian turned to her fully. "And if he does, then he proves exactly who he is." Lucian's jaw tightened. He had built his entire life around controlling outcomes, around making sure no one he cared about stood exposed, and yet here she was asking to step into the fire with open eyes. "You don't owe me this," he said quietly. She met his gaze. "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I'm tired of being hunted." That stopped him. He saw then that this wasn't fear driving her. It was exhaustion, the kind that came from running for too long, from surviving by inches, from knowing that hiding only delayed the inevitable. Victor entered the room, expression grave. "We have a window. Melanov is expecting an answer by morning." Lucian exhaled slowly. "Set the meat." Victor looked between them. "Boss, neutral ground," Lucian continued. "Public enough that he won't make a move immediately, quiet enough that he thinks he has control." Victor nodded reluctantly. "I'll arrange it." When Victor left, Lucian turned back to her. "If we do this, there's no guarantee I can protect you." She stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest. "I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking you to trust me. Trust." The one thing Lucian had learned never to give freely. And yet, morning came too quickly. They arrived separately as planned. An old opera house under renovation, its grandeur stripped down to bones and scaffolding. Dust hung in the air, catching the light like ghosts. Melanov liked symbolism, power decaying, power reclaimed. Lucian walked in alone. Melanov waited near the center, flanked by men who didn't bother pretending they were anything but killers. He smiled when he saw Lucian. "You look tired," Melanov said. "Love does that." Lucian ignored the jab. "You wanted her." "Yes," Melanov said smoothly. "And you came without her. That disappoints me." Lucian's lips curved slightly. "I came to tell you something." Melanov raised an eyebrow. "Oh. You don't get to touch her." Melanov laughed softly. "Lucian, everything you have is because men like me allowed you to rise. Don't confuse luck with immunity." Lucian took another step forward. "This isn't about territory anymore." Melanov's smile faded. "No, it's about pride." A sound echoed through the opera house then, footsteps, slow, deliberate. Melanov turned, irritation flashing across his face as she emerged from the shadows. "I told you to stay away," Lucian said, his voice tight. She didn't look at him, her eyes stayed on Melanov. "I'm here." Melanov's expression shifted, surprise, then amusement. "Brave or foolish?" She stopped a few feet from him. "You offered a deal, I'm listening." Lucian felt his chest tight. This wasn't the plan. Melanov studied her carefully. "You come with me, he keeps his city simple." She nodded slowly. "And what happens after?" Melanov shrugged. "After is irrelevant." She smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong." Before anyone could react, alarms blared outside. Sirens, too many, too coordinated. Melanov's men reached for weapons. Lucian's phone vibrated in his pocket, a message from Victor. "Now." Lucian's eyes met hers. She gave him the smallest nod. Understanding passed between them in a single breath. This wasn't surrender, it was bait. And as the first federal agents flooded the opera house from every entrance, Lucian realized just how far she'd been willing to go to end this. Melanov swore under his breath, eyes blazing as he looked between Lucian and the woman who had just turned the board upside down. "This," Melanov said coldly, "is not over." Lucian stepped closer to her, voice low. "No." Outside, the city erupted in chaos once more. And in that chaos, the most dangerous question of all lingered unanswered. Who would survive what came next? The first flashbang detonated near the stage, a concussive burst of light and sound that shattered whatever illusion of control Melanov still clung to. Men shouted. Boots thundered. Orders collided in half a dozen languages at once. Lucian moved without thinking. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her back into the shadows just as gunfire erupted. The opera house filled with smoke and screams, dust raining from the ceiling as bullets chewed into old stone. Federal agents flooded the lower levels, while Melanov's men fought like cornered animals. "This way," Lucian muttered, steering her through a narrow corridor he'd memorized from blueprints days earlier. She stayed close, matching his pace despite everything. Her breathing was controlled, her focus razor sharp. They burst through a side exit into the alley behind the building. Cold air slammed into them, carrying the echo of sirens and shouted commands. A van screeched to a halt at the mouth of the alley. Victor leaned out of the driver's seat. "Move!" They piled in, the door slamming shut just as another explosion rocked the opera house. The van lurched forward, tires screaming as they tore through side streets, disappearing into the maze of the city. Only when the noise faded did Lucian let himself breathe. She leaned back against the wall of the van, eyes closed for a moment, then opened them and looked straight at him. "You knew that would happen," Lucian nodded. "I hoped." She let out a shaky laugh. "You're insane." Occupational hazard. Victor glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "Melanov got away," Lucian's jaw tight. "Of course he did. And the feds," Victor continued. "They'll say this was about him, about organized crime." Lucian understood what he wasn't saying. This had painted a target on both of them, bigger than before. The van slowed as they reached another safe location. Doors opened. Fresh air rushed in. They stepped out into a quiet, empty warehouse that smelled like oil and old steel. For a long moment no one spoke. Then she turned to Lucian, her voice low and steady. "You knew I'd walk in." "Yes. And you still let me." Lucian met her gaze. "Because you're right, running doesn't end this." She studied him, searching for hesitation, finding none. "You're risking everything," she said. Lucian nodded. "I already did." Silence settled between them, heavy but unbroken. Outside, the city continued to burn with rumor and reaction. News would spread, names would surface. Lines would be drawn. Victor cleared his throat. "We need to move again. Melanov won't wait." Lucian took her hand, feeling the weight of what lay ahead settle fully onto his shoulders. "Neither will we," she squeezed back. "Then this time no half measures." Lucian looked at her, at the woman who had walked into his world and refused to bend, and realized the truth he could no longer ignore. This war wouldn't be won with power alone. It would be won with sacrifice. And he didn't yet know which one of them would have to make it. Outside the warehouse, a black sedan idled quietly at the far end of the street, its windows dark, its engine patient. Inside, Lucian felt that familiar tightening in his chest again, the sense of being watched, measured, weighed. Somewhere, Melanov was planning his next move. And somewhere else, someone even more dangerous was watching them both, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The night was far from over. Lucian felt it before anyone said a word. That shift in the air, the subtle wrongness that had kept him alive longer than most men in his line of work. He raised a hand, stopping Victor mid-step. Hold. Everyone froze. The warehouse was quiet, too quiet, no traffic outside, no distant sirens, just the low hum of electricity and the faint drip of water somewhere in the shadows. She noticed it too. Her spine straightened, eyes narrowing as she scanned the upper levels. We're not alone. Lucian nodded once. No, the lights went out, not all at once, section by section, like someone was turning the building into a puzzle they already knew how to solve. Victor swore under his breath. Backup power should have kicked in. Lucian's jaw tight, which means someone wanted it off. A voice echoed through the darkness, smooth and familiar. You always did like abandoned places, Lucian. Lucian didn't need the light to recognize that accent. Melanov, he said evenly. A single spotlight flickered on, illuminating the center of the warehouse. Melanov stepped into the glow, hands clasped behind his back, expression calm, confident, like a man who believed the board had finally aligned in his favor. You cost me a great deal tonight, Melanov continued. Men, money, reputation. Lucian stepped slightly in front of her without thinking. You're still standing, Melanov smiled. Barely, which means it's time to simplify. From the shadows around them, shapes emerged. Too many, armed, quiet, professional. She leaned in close to Lucian, her voice barely audible. This wasn't part of the plan. Lucian kept his eyes on Melanov. No, this is the part he doesn't announce. Melanov's gaze flicked to her, lingering. You are far more trouble than you look. She met his stare without blinking. You have no idea, Melanov chuckled. Oh, I do, that's why this ends now. Lucian's phone vibrated in his pocket. Once, a signal. Victor's hand twitched, but Lucian shook his head slightly. Not yet. Melanov continued, you have two choices, Lucian. You hand her over and I let your people walk out alive, or you don't and I erase everything you've built, starting tonight. The warehouse felt impossibly small. Lucian's mind raced, calculating angles, odds, exits. There were none that didn't end in blood. She squeezed his hand. Lucian glanced at her just for a second. In that moment, everything slowed. The noise, the danger. The weight of the city on his shoulders. What are you thinking? She whispered. Lucian exhaled slowly. I'm thinking, he said quietly, that you were right. Melanov tilted his head. About? Lucian looked back at him, eyes dark, resolved. That this ends with a choice. He released her hand and took one step forward. Melanov smiled, already certain he'd won. And that was the moment the doors at the far end of the warehouse exploded inward. Gunfire tore through the darkness. Shouts echoed. The room descended into chaos as floodlights blazed to life, revealing dozens of armed figures pouring in from every direction. Melanov's smile vanished. Lucian didn't move. He stood perfectly still in the center of it all, watching the board flip one final time. She stared at him, realization crashing over her face. What did you do? Lucian didn't answer. Because in that instant, as bullets flew and alliances shattered, he understood something with terrifying clarity. No matter how this ended, there would be no version of tomorrow where they both walked away unchanged. And somewhere in the chaos, someone screamed his name. The screen goes black. The darkness didn't last long. Emergency lights flickered back on in violent pulses, illuminating fragments of chaos in sharp, unforgiving flashes. Men shouted. Bodies hit concrete. The smell of gunpowder mixed with dust and oil thick enough to choke on. Lucian moved, not running, not hiding, commanding. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her down behind a steel support beam as bullets chewed through the space where they'd been standing seconds earlier. Victor was already barking orders, his voice cutting through the noise with lethal clarity. Left flank now, watch the catwalk. This wasn't a rescue. This was a war Lucian had prepared for long before he admitted it to himself. She stayed low, eyes tracking movement, instincts sharp. She wasn't dead weight. She never had been. And one of Melanov's men rounded the corner too fast. She reacted without hesitation, grabbing a fallen weapon and firing once. Clean, controlled. Lucian saw it. Something twisted in his chest, not fear, not pride, but the sick realization that the world would never let someone like her stay untouched. Melanov disappeared into the smoke. Of course he did, cowardice wrapped in strategy. He never stayed to watch consequences unfold. Lucian, Victor shouted. We've got incoming more than before. Lucian's phone vibrated again. Unknown number. You chose wrong. Lucian stared at the screen as the warehouse shook under another explosion. He typed back a single line, so did you. The reply came instantly, then you won't see what comes next. Lucian felt it then. That sharp, unmistakable pull in his gut, not danger, loss. He turned. She was gone, not dead, not bleeding. Gone. The space beside him was empty, her hand ripped from his in the chaos without him realizing when. His name tore from his throat before he could stop it. Where is she? Victor's face went pale as he scanned the room. She was right behind you. Lucian's vision narrowed, the sounds of the fight fading into a dull roar. Every instinct he had screamed the same truth. Melanov hadn't wanted a clean kill, he'd wanted leverage, again. Lucian stood slowly amid the wreckage, blood on his hands that he didn't remember earning. Around him, the fight was ending. His people were winning. It didn't matter. Victor stepped closer. "Boss, we can still pull out, regroup." Lucian looked at the shattered warehouse, at the bodies, at the smoking ruins of what had once been control. "No," he said quietly. His phone vibrated one last time. A photo, her seated in the back of a car, wrists bound, eyes lifted toward the camera, and not afraid, defiant. A final message beneath it. "Come alone. This time there are no deals." Lucian closed his eyes. When he opened them, the man who had built an empire was gone. All that remained was someone with nothing left to lose. And that was the most dangerous version of him yet. Lucian didn't answer the message. He didn't need to. He stood in the wreckage of the warehouse while his men secured the perimeter, their voices distant, muffled, like they were speaking from underwater. Smoke curled toward the ceiling. Somewhere a body groaned. Somewhere else a man screamed. None of it registered. Victor stepped in front of him. "Boss, say something." Lucian's eyes were fixed on the phone in his hand, on her face, on the way she'd stared back at the camera like she was daring the world to try harder. "She knew this would happen," Lucian said quietly. Victor frowned. "What? She knew," Lucian repeated. "She walked into this knowing he'd take her." Victor shook his head. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," Lucian replied. "She was buying time." Lucian turned and walked, blood crunching under his shoes, straight toward the exit. Victor followed. "Buying time for what?" Victor asked. Lucian stopped at the door and finally looked at him. "For me to choose." Outside, the night air felt sharp and alive. Lucian inhaled slowly, grounding himself. The city pulsed around them, unaware that something fundamental had shifted in its bones. "Call everyone off," Lucian said. "All visible movement, I want it quiet." Victor's eyes widened. "Boss, if you go alone, I am going alone." "That's suicide." Lucian's expression didn't change. "No, that's what he expects." Victor hesitated, then nodded. Loyalty won over fear, as it always had. Lucian stripped off his jacket and handed it to him. "If I don't come back, you will," Victor cut in. Lucian almost smiled. He took one last look at the city he had ruled from shadows, then got into the car alone. The address Melanov sent led him out of Manhattan, across a bridge and into an industrial zone that smelled like rust and water, an old shipyard. Floodlights burned too bright, casting long skeletal shadows across stacked containers. Lucian parked where instructed and stepped out. No guards, no welcome, just silence. Then the light snapped on. She sat on a chair at the center of the yard, wrists bound behind her, chin lifted. A single cut bled slowly at her temple. When she saw him, something softened in her eyes just for a moment. "You came," she said. Lucian swallowed. "You told me not to," she smiled faintly. "You never listen." Melanov's voice echoed from the darkness. Touching. He stepped into the light, immaculate as ever, flanked by men who didn't bother hiding their weapons. "I told you," Melanov continued, "no more deals." Lucian took a slow step forward. "Then this ends tonight." Melanov tilted his head. "It does, one way or another." Lucian met her eyes. There were 1,000 things he wanted to say, apologies, promises, confessions that came too late. Instead, he said the only thing that mattered. "Do you trust me?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." Lucian turned back to Melanov. "Let her go," Lucian said calmly. "And you can take me." Melanov laughed softly. "You really think you're worth more than her?" Lucian's gaze never wavered. "I know I am." Melanov studied him for a long moment, then raised a hand. The men shifted, weapons lifted. And in that frozen second, with floodlights blazing, guns aimed, and the night holding its breath, Lucian understood the truth with devastating clarity. This choice wouldn't save them both. It would only decide who lived long enough to remember the other. The first gun cocked, the wind off the water howled, and Lucian stepped forward. Melanov didn't give the order immediately. He enjoyed moments like this too much. The shipyard lights hummed, insects buzzing lazily around the flood lamps. The water below slapping against rusted hulls like it had no idea how close death was standing on its edge. His men spread out in a loose arc, weapons trained, fingers relaxed but ready, professional, the kind who never rushed. Lucian took another step forward. "Untie her," he said, calm, controlled, the same voice that had ended wars before they started. Melanov smiled. "You're assuming you still have leverage." Lucian's gaze never left her. "You didn't bring her here to kill her. If you wanted her dead, she'd already be floating." Melanov's smile thinned. He appreciated intelligence even when it was used against him. "You're right," he admitted. "Dead, she's useless. Alive, she's pressure." Lucian nodded once. "Then apply it to me." Silence stretched. She watched the exchange carefully, reading everything that wasn't being said. She could see it now, the calculation in Melanov's eyes, the way his attention kept drifting back to Lucian, measuring how far he could push before something snapped. "Lucian," she said quietly. He didn't look at her. "It's okay." "No," she said, voice steady despite the fear curling tight in her chest. "It's not, and you know it." Melanov raised a hand slightly, amused. I do love a woman who understands the room. She lifted her chin. You think this ends with him bleeding on your dock and you walking away clean? Melanov shrugged. Clean enough, she exhaled slowly. You're wrong, Melanov laughed. You're in no position to lecture me. Actually, she said, meeting his eyes, I am. Lushin finally turned his head just enough to look at her. There was a question in his eyes now, a warning. She ignored it. You think he's the threat, she continued. The guns, the money, the men, but that's not why you're here. Melanov's smile faltered for the first time. You're here, she said, because you're afraid of what happens if he walks away. The air shifted. Lushin felt it, that subtle tightening. The same instinct that had saved him 100 times before. Melanov's eyes hardened. Careful. He didn't stop. If he disappears, the balance changes. New players rise, old alliances break, and men like you lose the one enemy who kept the others in line. Lushin's chest tight. Melanov stared at her in silence now, studying her not as leverage but as a variable he hadn't accounted for. You don't kill him, she said quietly, because you need him. Melanov took a slow step forward. You're very confident for someone tied to a chair. She met his gaze without blinking. I'm confident because I know you won't shoot him. Melanov stopped. Lushin's pulse thundered in his ears. You're gambling, Melanov said softly. She nodded. So are you. For a long moment no one moved. The water slapped against metal. Somewhere far off a horn sounded. Then Melanov smiled again, but this time there was no humor in it. You're right, he said. I won't kill him. Lushin exhaled slowly. But I will break him. Before Lushin could move, Melanov snapped his fingers. Two men grabbed her chair and dragged it backward toward the edge of the dock. Lushin reacted instantly. Stop. Melanov didn't even look at him. You get to choose, he said calmly. You jump or she does. Lushin's heart slammed against his ribs. She twisted against her bindings, eyes wide now, finally afraid not for herself but for him. Lushin, don't. He was already moving. The dock edge loomed behind her, dark water churning below, cold and unforgiving. Lushin took another step forward, hands raised. You win, he said. Let her go. Melanov tilted his head. Do I? Lushin didn't hesitate. Yes. He looked at her one last time. There were no speeches left, no promises, just truth. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Her breath hitched. Lushin, he stepped toward the edge. And in that instant, just before everything shattered, a sound cut through the night. Sirens, not distant, close, too close. Melanov's men tensed, weapons shifting. Melanov swore under his breath. You planned this. Lushin didn't answer, because he hadn't. And as blue and red lights flooded the shipyard from every direction, Lushin realized with sick certainty that whatever came next was going to be worse than death. The sirens multiplied, ricocheting off steel containers and water, swallowing the shipyard in sound. Red and blue lights strobed across faces frozen between decision and disaster. Melanov's men shifted uneasily now, weapons still raised but no longer certain who they were meant for. This was not the clean ending he'd planned. Melanov's gaze snapped from the perimeter back to Lushin. You didn't arrange this, he said flatly. Lushin didn't deny it. His eyes were locked on her. She was fighting the bindings again, breathing hard now, fear finally cracking through her composure, but not fear for herself. Never that. This wasn't you, she whispered. No, Lushin said. It was. That made it worse, because chaos favors no one. Floodlights flared brighter as armored vehicles rolled into view at both ends of the shipyard. Loudspeakers barked commands that overlapped and contradicted each other. Federal, local, too many agencies responding to too many half-truths at once. Melanov smiled slowly, a predator realizing the hunt had changed. You see, he said softly, this is what happens when you invite too many wolves. He raised his hand. His men reacted instantly, not firing, not retreating, but moving her again, faster this time. The chair scraped across concrete as they hauled her closer to the edge. Lushin's body moved before his mind could catch up. No, a gunshot cracked, not aimed at him. The rope snapped. The chair tipped. For one endless second, time slowed to crawl. Lushin saw it all, the widening of her eyes, the sudden weightlessness, the black water yawning beneath her like a mouth. He didn't think, he didn't calculate, he ran. Bullets tore into the dock around him as he dove, arms outstretched. They hit the water together. Cold slammed into him like a wall. The impact stole his breath, drove the air from his lungs in a violent rush. Darkness swallowed them whole as they sank beneath the surface, the world above reduced to muffled thunder and distorted light. Lushin fought his way back to her, hands finding fabric, then skin. She was conscious, thrashing, disoriented, but alive. He wrapped an arm around her and kicked hard, every muscle screaming as they broke the surface. Gunfire still echoed above. Sirens screamed. Orders were shouted and ignored. Lushin dragged her toward the shadow beneath the dock, forcing them into the cold, oily water where lights couldn't reach. She coughed violently, clinging to him, nails digging into his shoulder. Lushin, she gasped. I've got you, he said, though his lungs burned and his side screamed in protest. I've got you. They stayed under the dock as long as they could, listening as the chaos above shifted again. More shots, then shouting, then something else, panic. Melanov hadn't planned for this either. Eventually the noise moved away. Engines roared. Orders were barked with less confidence now. Lucian waited until his body began to shake uncontrollably before he moved again. They surfaced farther down the shoreline, hidden by shadows and debris. He hauled her onto the concrete, collapsing beside her, chest heaving. For a moment neither of them spoke. Water dripped from her hair. Blood from his side darkened the concrete beneath him. The city lights shimmered across the river like nothing had happened at all. She rolled onto her side and looked at him, eyes bright with shock and something dangerously close to grief. "You jumped," she said. Lucian managed a weak, breathless laugh. "You told me not to walk away." Her throat worked as she swallowed. "You could have died. So could you?" Reach for him then, fingers trembling as they brushed his face like she needed to confirm he was real. "This ends now," she said softly. "It has to." Lucian closed his eyes, because he knew the truth she didn't yet see. Above them, the war hadn't ended. It had just slipped into the shadows, quieter, meaner, and far more personal. And somewhere in the city, someone was already rewriting the story of what happened at the docks. Someone who would not forgive this. Someone who would not forget her. Lucian opened his eyes and looked out at the river, feeling the future closing in around them like a tightening noose. "This doesn't end," he said quietly. She didn't argue. She just leaned into him, exhausted and alive, as the sound of sirens faded into the distance and something far worse took its place. Silence. The silence was heavier than the gunfire had been. Lucian lay on his back, staring up at the underside of the dock, water dripping steadily onto his face. Each breath scraped through his chest like broken glass. He could feel the blood soaking into his clothes, warm now, cooling too fast. She was beside him, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped around herself, shaking, not from fear, from the delayed weight of everything that had almost happened. "They'll control the story," she said quietly. "They always do," Lucian nodded. "They already are." Above them, engines roared away one by one. The authorities would claim confusion. A failed operation. No names. No conclusions. Melanov would vanish into the cracks he'd spent a lifetime carving. Chin would reappear somewhere else under a different title. Everyone would survive except the truth. Lucian pushed himself up with a groan, bracing against a rusted pillar. His vision swam, but he forced it steady. "We can't go back," she said. "I know. They'll watch everything you touch. I know." She turned to him then, eyes sharp again despite the exhaustion. "Then what's left?" Lucian didn't answer right away. He looked out at the black water, at the reflection of the city breaking apart with every ripple. Once he had owned those reflections, controlled them. Now they meant nothing. "What's left," he said slowly, "is disappearing in a way they can't predict." She frowned. "You said we were done running." "We are," Lucian replied. "This isn't running, this is resetting the board." Footsteps crunched on gravel nearby. Lucian tensed instantly, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. A figure emerged from the shadows, soaked, hood up, face obscured. "Victor." He stopped when he saw them alive, relief flashing across his face before discipline slammed it back into place. "Jesus," Victor muttered. "You look like hell." Lucian almost smiled. "You should see the other guys." Victor crouched beside them. "You've got maybe 20 minutes before this place crawls with people asking questions." She looked up. "Who called the cops?" Victor hesitated. Lucian's eyes narrowed. "Victor." "Not Melanov," Victor said carefully. "Not Chin either." Silence settled again. "Then who?" she asked. Victor glanced at Lucian, then back at her. "That's the problem." Lucian felt the chill sink deeper than the river water ever could. "There's a third player," Victor continued. "Quiet, old, powerful. They've been cleaning up everyone else's messes for decades. Tonight was a test." "A test for what?" she asked. Victor swallowed. "For you." Lucian closed his eyes, of course. The war he thought he'd been fighting wasn't the real one. It never was. He'd been reacting to ripples, not the current underneath. Victor stood. "They know what you're capable of now, what you're willing to do." She looked at Lucian, understanding dawning slowly, painfully. "They're not done with us." "No," Lucian said. "They're just getting interested." In the distance, sirens began to rise again, fainter this time, but moving closer. Victor extended a hand. "We move. Now." Lucian took it, then reached for her. She hesitated only a second before taking his hand, pulling herself to her feet. They stood there together at the edge of the river, bruised, soaked, alive, knowing something far larger than Melanov or the FBI had just stepped out of the shadows. As they disappeared into the night, Lucian felt the familiar tightening in his chest one last time. Not fear. Recognition. Because whatever had just begun wasn't a war for territory. It was a war for control over them. Somewhere, someone was already deciding which one of them would be more useful alive. The city lights flickered, the water kept moving, and the game reset. They didn't take the main roads. Victor led them through back streets and service tunnels, places Lucian hadn't used in years because they were too close to the bones of the city, too honest. The kind of routes you only memorized when survival mattered more than power. They stopped at a building that didn't look like anything worth noticing. No guards. No cameras. Just a narrow door with peeling paint and a single light that flickered like it might give up at any second. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old paper. Lucian sank into a chair the moment the door shut, the adrenaline finally draining from his body. His hands shook now. Not violently. Subtly. The way they did when the danger passed and the cost arrived. She knelt in front of him without asking and peeled back his soaked jacket. Her hands were gentle but efficient, already assessing the wound with a clinical calm that felt almost unreal after everything they just survived. "You're bleeding too much," she said. "I've had worse." She shot him a look. "You're not 20 anymore," he almost smiled. Victor hovered nearby, uneasy. "We don't have long." She finished bandaging him as best she could, then sat back on her heels, studying Lucian's face like she was trying to memorize it. "Victor said they were testing us," she said quietly. "What does that mean?" Lucian leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. "It means tonight wasn't about killing me or you, it was about seeing how far we'd go," she swallowed. And Lucian opened his eyes and met hers. They got their answer. Silence filled the room again, thick with unspoken fear. Victor broke it. "We intercepted something on a private channel. No names, no agencies, just one phrase." Lucian's gaze sharpened. "Which is?" Victor hesitated. "Asset viability confirmed." The words landed like a physical blow. She looked between them. "Asset?" Lucian nodded slowly. "That's what they call people they don't see as human anymore," her jaw tight. "So what happens next?" Lucian stood, ignoring the protest from his side, and walked to the small window overlooking the alley. Dawn was beginning to creep in, pale and indifferent. "Next," he said, "they decide which one of us is more valuable." Rose and joined him, standing shoulder to shoulder. "And if we don't let them?" Lucian exhaled, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Then we stop being assets." Outside, a car idled at the corner of the street, not following, just waiting. Lucian felt it again, that familiar pull, the sense of eyes on him, on them. Somewhere, someone had already made the first move of the next game, and this time it wouldn't be played in the shadows. Lucian reached for her hand, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever happens next," he said, "they're not choosing for us." She squeezed his hand back. "Good." Because in that moment, with the city waking up, enemies regrouping, and unseen powers circling closer, one truth became impossible to ignore. They hadn't survived the night, they'd been marked, and the price for that was still coming. The knock came just as the sun crested the buildings. 3 sharp raps, controlled, confident. Victor froze. Lucian felt every muscle in his body tight. Not panic. Readiness? He squeezed her hand once, a silent signal, then released it. "Stay back," he said quietly. She didn't argue, but she didn't retreat far either. She stood just behind him, close enough to hear his breathing change. Victor moved to the door, hand hovering near the concealed weapon at his side. "Who is it?" a voice answered from the other side, calm, unhurried. "Someone who's been waiting a long time to finally meet you, Lucian." Lucian closed his eyes for half a second. He knew that voice. Not from memory, from instinct. "Open the door," Lucian said. Victor hesitated. "Boss, that's an order." The door creaked open. A man stepped inside alone, mid-50s, impeccably dressed, no visible weapon, no need for one. His presence filled the room in a way guns never could. His eyes went immediately to her, not with hunger, not with threat, with assessment. "So," the man said softly, "this is her." She lifted her chin. "And you are," he smiled faintly. "One who decides who becomes a problem and who becomes an opportunity." Lucian stepped forward. "You set tonight in motion." The man inclined his head. "Indirectly. You watched." "Yes." "You tested us." "Yes." Lucian's voice hardened, and the man's gaze flicked between them, lingering on the way they stood, not shielding, not hiding together. "And you exceeded expectations." Silence stretched tight as wire. "What do you want?" she asked. The man turned to her fully now. "To offer you a choice." Lucian's jaw tightened. "You don't get to, I get to offer," the man interrupted calmly. "You get to refuse, but you should hear it first." He reached into his coat slowly and produced a thin folder, setting it on the table between them. "Walk away," he said. "Disappear, new names, new lives, no one hunts you, no one uses you." Lucian didn't touch the folder. "And the cost?" she asked. The man met her eyes. "One of you stays." The room seemed to lose oxygen. Lucian felt it then, the true shape of the trap. Not violence, not death, separation. "No," Lucian said immediately. The man smiled. "You don't know which one." She turned sharply toward Lucian, breath catching. "Lucian," the man raised a hand. "I'm not asking for an answer now, I'm informing you of the rules." He stepped back toward the door. "You have 48 hours. After that, the world decides for you." He paused at the threshold and looked at her once more. "You're far more dangerous than you realize." And he was gone. The door closed. Silence crushed down on the room. She stared at the folder like it might explode. "He wants to break us." Lucian didn't respond. He was already thinking of the only move left. Outside, the waiting car pulled away. Inside, Lucian finally spoke, his voice low, certain, and terrifyingly calm. "No one chooses between us." She looked at him, fear and resolve colliding in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" Lucian picked up the folder and dropped it into the trash. "I'm going to make them regret ever learning our names." Somewhere in the city, a clock started counting down, and for the first time since the night began, the future split into two impossible paths, only one of which would end with them together. The end to be continued.